4 more magical bags for your pantry that will save the day again and again. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. Welcome back to the channel. Today I've got 4 more emergency meal kits, otherwise known as meals in a bag. These bags are completely shelf stable and contain everything you need to make a complete meal or dish, right down to and including any water you need to prepare it. So all you have to do is grab a bag off the shelf and get cooking. Because they're shelf stable, they're great to use for emergency preparedness, and they're a very simple way to get started if it's something that you haven't thought much about before, or to organize and elevate your preps if you have. Here on the channel, I love helping people with real solutions for prepping and emergency food storage. Most people in the first hours or days of an emergency situation aren't going to go haul out buckets of beans and rice, especially if you're thinking the power's going to be back on and things will be back to normal fairly soon. What we can really use are quick, easy meals that are filling, comforting, and familiar. And meals in a bag fits the bill. But they're good for so much more as well. Anytime you don't know what to cook for supper, or your plans fall through, or you haven't gotten to the grocery store, you have these meals at the ready to pull into action. If you're running late getting home and you need to ask your spouse or your teen or someone else to start supper, but they're not usually the one who cooks, just tell them to grab a bag off the shelf. And these bags are a great way to bless someone who could use a meal or two for whatever reason. Some people even like to put these kits together for blessing boxes or something similar in their area. But why Dollar Tree? Dollar Tree has a very limited grocery section, especially if you're sticking to the shelf-stable aisles. I think it's a really good exercise for our minds to challenge ourselves to come up with meals from very limited ingredients and practice working with what's available. You never know when an unexpected expense might just push us over the edge and eat up the next week's grocery budget. And those creative meal planning skills might really come in handy. Another reason is because many people have access to a Dollar Tree or a store like it, and some people actually may not have access to any other store for one reason or another. So I hope these meal kits made with simple, easy to find ingredients can be a help to people. Sure, meals from Dollar Tree may not always be the healthiest meals, but I believe in everything in moderation, and sometimes just having food to eat is the most important thing. If you eat differently, I hope you can take this same concept, adapt it to the foods that you will eat, and think outside the box and come up with some of your own emergency meal kits that work for you and the way you eat. I put my meal kits together in bags I get from Amazon, but over the years, I've used everything from gallon and 2-gallon Ziplocs to plain paper gift bags to plastic shoebox size storage containers, all of which you can get at Dollar Tree. I'll put links and sources for the supplies that I use now down in the description below the video in case you want to access any of them. I use chalkboard labels on the narrow end of the bag so that I can easily see what's in it when it's on the shelf. And I usually adhere a sticky pocket to the broad side of the bag so that I can slip in a card with the recipe instructions and also the ingredients. That way it's easy to restock the bag with the same meal once it's been used up. Don't forget, for emergency use, or if you want to use these for camping or something, which they're great for, you're going to need a way to cook without power. Later in this video, I'll show you what I use that I really like and recommend to people all the time. Some of the meals I'm showing today are things that are going to be baked. So I'm also going to link down below some of my favorite choices for baking without power. Usually the meals are pretty flexible though, so you can adapt them to stovetop if you don't have a way to bake. Let's get started on these meals. Be sure to stay till the end of the video because you will not believe what I make with only 2 ingredients. The first meal I'm doing today, I call Thanksgiving pot pie. It has all the flavors of a Thanksgiving dinner in a hearty 1-dish meal. Emergencies don't check the calendar. They can happen at any time, and it would be nice to have a special holiday-themed meal as a backup if you needed it. But this is also just a delicious meal to eat anytime. The ingredients we're going to need for this meal is going to be a box of stuffing mix. I've got 2 cans of turkey meat from Dollar Tree. I don't find this turkey all year long. I think they got it in special for Thanksgiving, so I found it recently. So you could always sub chicken if you're watching this at a different time and you can't find the turkey. Or if you're not limited to Dollar Tree, I think Walmart sells a can of turkey like this all year long. We're going to be using a can of cream of chicken soup. And there's also a can of turkey gravy here and a can of mixed vegetables. I couldn't find the name brand vegetables they sell in the mixed vegetable variety when I went, and I wanted mixed vegetables, not like just peas or just green beans or something. So I found this brand, which is something I'd never seen there before. You can see that this one was only 75 cents, so it's actually a better deal. I don't know how they'll be, but they're going to be mixed in with a lot of other things, so I don't think we'll notice. I've got this everything but the leftovers seasoning that I found there recently. This is something new that I found that is really, really, it smells really yummy. It's got all those flavors and seasonings that you would want in your turkey or your stuffing. So I'm putting this in for a little bit of extra flavor in the filling. Now you could do a few things with this. You could either put some of this into a small baggie or like a small baby food jar, a couple of teaspoons, whatever you want to use to season the recipe. Or you could just include the whole container like I'm going to do, and then use what you need, have it for people to season their own if they want, and then just kind of leave it in the bag when you refill the bag with new ingredients after you've used it. You could also leave this out if you wanted, and it would be fine without it. We have had it without it, but I think this does add a little bit of extra goodness to this recipe. Then I've got a bag of mashed potatoes, instant mashed potatoes, and these are the kind you just add water to, so they're already seasoned up with butter, salt, milk, all the things you need. And I've got a bag of the crispy French fried onions that we can top it all off with, because that's definitely a part of Thanksgiving to me. And over here I do have 2 bottles of water. These are going to be used for preparing things like the stuffing and the potatoes. I like to include the water in the bag so that we don't have to use up any of our precious water if it is an emergency. Now let's get these ingredients in the bag. This meal is definitely going to need the larger of the bags that I use. So this is the larger size bag. I'm going to start by adding my 2 cans of turkey and my can of cream of chicken. I'm going to add my mixed vegetables and my turkey gravy. I'm going to put in my box of stuffing mix, my 2 bottles of water. I've got my packet of mashed potatoes and my seasoning. And I'm going to add my crispy onions. Now this bag is ready to go on the shelf. All right, to start preparing this Thanksgiving pot pie, I'm going to start with the crust, and the crust is going to be made from our stuffing. So I'm going to go ahead and dump the stuffing into the bowl. That smells so good. Stuffing is probably my favorite part of a Thanksgiving dinner. Now I'm going to take something we're going to use in the filling, and I'm going to take these turkey cans, I'm going to open them up, and I'm going to drain the broth that's in these turkey cans right into the stuffing. We're going to want a little bit of extra water or liquid in our stuffing because we're going to want it pretty soft and sticky to form the crust. And we don't want a lot of extra liquid in the filling because we don't want it to be too runny, but I don't want to waste the liquid. So we're going to put it in here. Now these cans have pop tops, but I did want to mention that whenever you make kits like these, make sure that you have a can opener, a manual can opener for emergencies, either with your emergency cooking supplies, or you can go ahead and throw like a little cheap military style can opener into each bag. Something to make sure you'll be able to open the cans if they don't have the pop top. I'm just going to use the lid to pour the broth off, and I'm going to set the turkey aside for a little bit later. And now I'm going to do the same with the second can. And I'm going to leave the turkey right in the can and set that aside for later. Now I'm going to take one of my bottles of water and I'm going to heat this up to boiling. You could do this in a small pot, or you could do this in a kettle of some sort. I'm just going to do it in a glass measuring cup right in the microwave because I do have power right now. But of course, if you didn't have power and you were doing this during an emergency, you would want to do this differently. I'm probably not going to use this whole bottle of water because this is about 2 cups and we only need about 1.5 cups in here. Like I mentioned, we do want it a little bit wetter and stickier than usual, but that turkey broth is going to take care of a lot of that. So we may not use all the water, and that's part of the reason I didn't include the broth with the water and heat it all together, because I want the rest of the water to be, fine and good for drinking or anything else if we don't use it. Dollar Tree does sell a pie plate for $1.25, so this is what I'm going to use tonight. It's a little bit shallow, but I think we'll be able to make it work by mounding our ingredients up and making a really heaping pot pie. All right, so I've got my boiling water here. This is about 2 cups of water, and I only want about 1.5 cups. I'm just going to pour it in slowly and mix and just go until it's enough for the consistency that I want. So I've got a fork here. I have seen some recipes where making a stuffing crust like this, they will put it into like a food processor or something like that and make it really smooth, but I found that I can usually just use the fork to mash it up and get the consistency that I want. And that would be much more emergency and power outage friendly also. My arm is getting tired. All right, so this is about the consistency that I want. We want it pretty moist, but still sticky, and we're going to need to be able to form it into a crust on our pan. I only used about a cup of water out of here, maybe a little bit more than a cup, because there was quite a bit of broth in that turkey. So really, depending on how much liquid you get out of your meat and other things like that, you may use more or less water, because I've used more than this sometimes when I've done this. All right, now it's going to be time to form our crust. I am not going to put any spray in this pan. It's going to be fine without it. So I'm just going to start pressing this stuffing mixture into the pan and up the sides of the pan to form a crust. Now I'm going to scrape this out the best I can, but I'm actually going to use this same bowl to mix the crust and the filling and the topping in, and it's going to be okay if some of the flavors, get left behind and mixed in. I never used to do things like this. I'm the kind of person who always needed to have a clean bowl for each separate step, but for something like this, I finally kind of learned to be okay with it and go with the flow. And if some of these stuffing flavors get into the filling, or some of the filling flavors get into the topping, it's going to be okay. Especially in an emergency, we wouldn't want to have too many dirty dishes or use too much water washing it out in between each step. But you can do whatever you're comfortable with. It works best to use like a pressing motion rather than too much of a spreading motion with this, and kind of level off the top of the crust a little bit. All right, so there's our crust. I don't know if you can see how that has formed a nice little bowl crust shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven. This bakes a little bit first, just to get it to kind of dry up and form a little bit more of a crust. I've got my oven set to 350. I'm going to go ahead and put this in for about 20 minutes or until it starts to get dry and set. All right, while the crust is in the oven, I'm going to go ahead and mix up the filling. And like I said, I'm going to use the same dish. You can do whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. I'm going to start by dumping in the turkey that we had drained earlier and set aside. And I'm going to add in the mixed vegetables, but I am going to drain the liquid out of here. Once again, we don't want too much liquid in our filling, but I also don't want to waste the water. So I'm going to go ahead and drain it into the measuring cup with the remaining water from the stuffing, because I do need water for my potatoes. And I don't think it's going to be a big deal if there's a little bit of veggie water in the potatoes. It'll just give it a little bit of extra flavor. So if you are in an emergency especially, you would probably want to do the same thing, or you could have used this liquid in the stuffing instead. And use less water. But if you're just making this dish just for a dinner and you're not in a situation where water is precious, you don't have to save this water if you don't want to. I'm going to use the lid to drain the veggies. And I'm going to dump the veggies into the bowl with the turkey. Now, something I didn't realize when I picked up this different brand of veggies is that these are actually no salt added. It does not say it on the front of the can, which I feel like it should, but I do not see salt in the ingredients list. So I'm doubly glad that I chose to put that seasoning in here, because I think we're going to really need the seasoning without the salt in the veggies. Of course, that's also personal preference, because some people like more salt in their food and some people like less salt, and some people need to have less salt for health reasons. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put in my cream of chicken soup. I'm just going to go ahead and put the soup right in here with the veggies and the turkey. Use my favorite spatula here that I use. I love this little skinny scraper for scraping out soup cans, but actually, one of the reasons I like it is because it fits right up under that rim when you have a pop top can. But when I use my no sharp edges can opener, I don't even get that rim left. All right, now I'm just going to go ahead and mix these filling ingredients together. And now I'm just going to season it to taste with this everything but the leftover seasoning. Now this has, what does this have in it? Granulated onion, salt, citric acid, which is like vitamin C. I'm not sure exactly why that's in there, if it's for freshness or taste. Ground black pepper, ground celery, rosemary, thyme, turmeric, sage, and parsley. And this really, really smells delicious. But I tell you those ingredients so in case you can't find this seasoning, you can use something else if you want to season it. You could use salt and poultry seasoning or anything like that. Any seasoning that you would like with this type of a dish would be fine. Oh, that smells so good. I have seen that Trader Joe's carries a seasoning like that that's pretty popular, and I've been to Trader Joe's once. I don't have one close to me, so I have not been in years. So I've never gotten to look for that seasoning that they have. So I was really excited to find basically a dupe of it at Dollar Tree. And one last ingredient I'm going to add to this filling is going to be some of these French fried onions. These are for the topping, but this amount of French fried onions is really good for like a 9 by 13 pan. So in a pie plate, it's a little bit much. And I have done it putting them all on top, but it's going to be a little bit less messy if we add about half of them to our filling. It's also going to give it a little bit of extra flavor. Let's go ahead and mix these in. I tell you what, I think French fried onions is a very underutilized and underappreciated ingredient. I think so many people only pull those out for their green bean casserole at Thanksgiving. And we use them for a lot of other things, and they're super tasty. And one thing I love them for is a casserole topping. They get so crispy, crunchy, and they have a really good flavor, and we just really like them. All right, so now this filling is ready to go into the pie shell. Our stuffing pie crust as soon as that comes out of the oven. All right, so this crust has been in the oven about 20 minutes, and it is starting to dry out on the top of it, so it's ready for our filling. So I'm going to go ahead and put the filling right into the crust. Once again, I'm going to scrape as much out of here as I can because I'm going to be mixing up the potato topping in the same bowl, but I don't think it's going to be a big deal if some of this flavor is left behind to be mixed in with our potatoes. I'm just going to spread this out. All right, so now I'm going to set this aside and we're going to get to work on the topping. So the topping is going to be our mashed potatoes, and we need 2 cups of water for these mashed potatoes. I have got almost 2 cups right here just from what I had left over from the stuffing and from the veggie water that I drained into here. So I'm going to use just a little bit more from here to make this 2 cups. So what that means is in this case, I could have gotten away with just using 1 big bottle and one of the smaller 8-ounce bottles that they do also sell at Dollar Tree. But I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to have extra water. You never know when you might need it. Your meat or your veggies might have more or less juice in the can with them. And this is just drinking water that anyone could use to drink with their meal, anything we have left over. I'm going to go ahead and heat this 2 cups of water up to boiling so we can prepare our potatoes. Okay, so while the water is heating, I'm going to go ahead and pour the potato flakes into the bag. All right, so I've dumped the potatoes in the bowl. Just double check your potato package because they can sometimes make different sizes or sell different sizes of potato packages. So this is the one that has 4 servings and it calls for 2 cups of water, just so you know you have the appropriate size. You could always use a different size if it's pretty close, but you just want to make sure you get the water amount right. So I've got my 2 cups of boiling water here. I'm going to go ahead and mix this all in. This will thicken pretty quickly. I do just want to point out, in case I forgot to earlier, that I did choose a heat-safe Pyrex bowl to mix all these up in because I knew I would be pouring boiling water right into the bowl with some of the ingredients. So it's probably a good idea to do that. All right, so these potatoes have gotten pretty thick. They might thicken up a little bit more, but they will be easier to spread onto the top of the pie before they're too thick. So I'm just going to go ahead and start dolloping these on. We don't want to have to push them around too much because we don't want to disturb the filling too much. So I'm trying to spread them out as I put them on. All right, so now let's get this spread out the rest of the way. All right, so this beautiful pie is now ready for the topping, and then it's going to go back in the oven. Now the crust is still warm and the potatoes are still warm. So the filling wasn't heated. The filling's the only thing that's going to have to heat through. But just like so many of our other meals in a bag dishes, everything's fully cooked. Nothing needs to get tender or soft or cooked through to be safe. So all we're going to have to do is warm this. So I'm going to put the rest of my French fried onions on the top. Now you do have to watch that they don't burn. So sometimes if it's going to take a little bit longer to heat, I might lay a little piece of foil over the top to keep them from getting too browned. It's good to get them somewhat browned. You just don't want to have them get black and get a burnt taste. So the other thing you could do is to bake the pie for a while and then put these on, but they do stick better to the potato topping when it's fresh like this before it goes in the oven and starts to get a little crusted on the top. And you can press these in a little bit if you want to make them stick better. And like I mentioned, you can vary the amount that you put inside the pie and the amount that you put on the top. I have put them all on the top before, but it's just a little bit harder to get them to stick because they pile up on each other instead of just on the potato. All right, this is ready to go back in the oven. Like I mentioned, we just need to heat it through and crisp up the onions on the topping. And I'm going to keep an eye on it to make sure that they don't burn. I'll see you back here when it's done. All right, here it is. This has been baking for about 30 minutes. And I did put a slip of foil, just a small piece of foil I laid over the top just to keep the onions from browning too much. But you can see the gravy from the filling is starting to bubble out here. You can see that. So it is definitely hot and ready to go. In fact, I'm going to let this cool off a little bit before I serve it because it can be difficult to serve the first slice when it's super, super hot. And of course, I want it to kind of look nice. So I'll see you back here in a little bit when it's cool. Okay, this has been cooling for a little bit. I think it's time to try to serve it. This is one of those things where it's going to be difficult to get the first slice out without making a mess, like it always is with a pie. But I'm going to do my best. One last thing before we serve it is I am going to warm up this turkey gravy because this is just to go over the top of the dish, just like a little finishing touch. Now, something to remember about this dish, because if you don't have any type of oven to bake it in, whether it's an emergency and you don't have a grid down type of baking method available to you, or whether you are in a situation where you just don't have an oven or a toaster oven or anything available to use, you could always serve this up as just everything separate, like a regular meal. So you could just put your potatoes on your plate separately, your stuffing separately, your veggies separately, mix the gravy with the turkey meat together and serve that separately, or maybe over the mashed potatoes. You could do this differently if you weren't able to bake it. All right, I do have a pie server. I own a pie server. I have no idea where it's moseyed off to, so I'm going to try using an offset spatula instead. I don't know how this will work, but we'll see. You know, the first piece is always the hardest to serve. Oops, I lost a little bit of the crust. That is going to be delicious though. Well, it is not the prettiest looking plate you ever saw, but that's kind of my fault. But this is going to be delicious. Now, this would be nice with a little bit of cranberry sauce served alongside. That's the one thing I wish I would have put in this bag. I saw cranberry sauce at Dollar Tree. I didn't grab it, and then I went back looking for it, and it was all gone. So that is something that I would put in if I was going to do this again. But let's try our Thanksgiving pot pie and see how it came out. Get a little bit of everything. That is really tasty. I'm actually shocked that this is a Dollar Tree meal because this is amazing. We've got a stuffing crust and a turkey, turkey and vegetable filling, mashed potato topping, everything from Dollar Tree. This is really amazing. I do think I would recommend going with the name brand vegetables because I just tasted a pea from this cheapo vegetables, and it's a little bit, has that texture of a cheap pea, the ones I would usually feed to the chickens. But other than that, the flavor of this is delicious, and this worked out really well. I can't believe this is a Dollar Tree recipe. I even forgot to put gravy over top, which I did warm up the gravy. And I gotta tell you, I tried this gravy when I was warming it up and I was impressed. For a canned turkey gravy, it was really good. Even better. That is like Thanksgiving dinner all in one dish. The next meal kit today is a Southwest chicken mac and cheese, and it is so good. This is inspired by a favorite quick meal that my family loves called simply macaroni and cheese with tomatoes. We cook and drain macaroni noodles, dump in a can or two of diced tomatoes, heat it up nice and hot, and then sink in a bunch of sliced up Velveeta cheese. It's the kind of recipe where there's really no measurements, you just know when it feels right. Once the cheese has gotten all melty, stir it all together and serve. It's simple, but we love it. I used that meal as an inspiration, but I changed the cooking method to eliminate draining and wasted water. I gave it a Southwest flair and added chicken to make it a little more special and boost up the protein. Still very simple and even more delicious. These are the ingredients we need for this meal. I'm going to be using some macaroni noodles. I'm not going to use the whole box of macaroni noodles because these pasta boxes from Dollar Tree are pretty large. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take 2 cups out of this box, and I'm going to put mine in a mason jar. Depending on how long you think you might keep these bags on the shelf and what the storage conditions are where you live, you probably could even put it into like a Ziploc freezer bag or something. But I'm going to be using a mason jar. So I've got 2 cups of macaroni in the mason jar. And then I've got my 2 packets of Velveeta cheese sauce that they sell at Dollar Tree. These are 4-ounce packages. 2 of those. I've got a can of Rotel, which is the diced tomatoes with the green chilies. Now this does add a little bit of spice to this dish. It's not too bad. Most of us are pretty familiar with Rotel. If you're sensitive to spicy food, they do sell a mild Rotel, but I've never seen that at Dollar Tree. Or you could just use plain diced tomatoes without the chilies if you don't want any spice at all. Now that's going to be, the cans of Rotel are a little bit smaller. They're 10-ounce cans, so they're a little bit smaller than the cans of regular diced tomatoes, but it would just be a little bit more tomatoey. And then I am using 2 cans of the chicken from Dollar Tree. If you want to make this dish even more budget friendly, you could cut the chicken down or even leave the chicken out entirely. Like I mentioned before, this is based on a dish that we make in my family where we don't add any meat at all. And then I have 1 of Dollar Tree's bottles of water to cook the pasta in. This doesn't seem like a lot of liquid for 2 cups of pasta, and it's really not quite enough liquid for that amount of pasta, but because we're going to be having the liquid from the tomatoes, and I'm also going to use the liquid from the chicken, this should work out just fine. This is a 1-dish pasta recipe where the pasta cooks with all the liquid in the recipe and we don't drain any liquid out afterwards, which is a really good way to do things if you were in an emergency situation because you wouldn't want to waste a lot of water. All right, let's put these ingredients in the bag. This meal will fit in the smaller of the 2 bag sizes that I use. I'm going to start by adding my macaroni. Next, I'm going to add my 2 cans of chicken, my bottle of water, my can of Rotel, and then I'm going to add my 2 pouches of cheese sauce. And now this bag is all ready to go on the shelf. Okay, to fix up this Southwest chicken mac and cheese, this is entirely a stovetop recipe. So I'm going to use my butane emergency burner. These are really great to have. I suggest everyone has some way to cook when the power's out, and this would be my first choice. This burner is really inexpensive and it works really well. In fact, if you know anybody who would need some help in the preparedness department and they don't have a way to cook when the power's out or boil water or anything like that, then this would be a really great Christmas gift as well. Now this can of fuel is getting low, so I might run out before the meal finishes, but I'm going to use it up. And I'm going to use this medium saucepan. I think this should be big enough for this dish. I'm going to start by just emptying my bottle of water into the pot. And then I'm also going to add the Rotel tomatoes with all the juice into the pot. And then the other thing I'm going to do before I get started is I'm going to open both my cans of chicken and I'm going to drain just the broth from the cans into the pot. There's usually a little bit of fat in the can as well, which is normal. And you can put that little bit of fat right into the water as well, just like you might put a little bit of oil into your pasta water. So that's another thing you can do. Or you can just leave it in with the chicken and put it in when you put the chicken in. But every last bit of nutrition we can get out of this food, if it's an emergency situation especially, we want to make sure that we use it all. And that would be some calories, a concentrated source of calories that we would need. All right, so now I'm going to put the heat on high. I just want to bring this up to a boil. And I'm going to keep a lid on it just to conserve as much heat and as much liquid as we can, because we're going to need all of this liquid to cook our pasta. And we don't want to waste fuel, so we want to conserve the heat. So I'm just going to bring this to a boil before we add the pasta, or at least up to a simmer. All right, so this is boiling now. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in my pasta. Give that a stir. I'm going to get the lid right back on so we don't lose too much liquid. So the directions on the pasta say about 11 to 13 minutes. So I'm just going to let this go for about that much time until the pasta is tender and the liquid is pretty much all absorbed. And I will stir this occasionally to keep it from sticking, but whenever it's not being stirred, I'm going to keep the lid on it to keep as much moisture in as I can. All right, so it's been about 11 minutes, so about the lower end of the time frame that we need. So I'm just going to try a piece of macaroni and see if it's gotten fully tender yet. Yeah, that is pretty tender. That is done. So you can see that most of the liquid is absorbed. I'm going to leave the lid off for a minute and just boil out a little bit of this extra liquid, but it's actually fine because whatever we have left over will absorb into the dish. I have actually had it with a lot more liquid than this left, and it turned out great after you let it set for a little bit. All right, so I'm going to turn this off now, and I'm going to add my 2 packets of Velveeta cheese sauce mix, or just cheese sauce. It's not a mix, it's the sauce. I'm going to add that in first because this needs to melt and soften and get mixed all throughout, and then I'll fold in the chicken just so that we can get some bigger pieces of chicken remaining and not let it get all shredded up. So I used to keep these packets on hand all the time because it was the only way I could get my oldest daughter to eat broccoli when she was young. Squeeze in a little bit of this cheese sauce onto it. And I give this little mix just so this one can start melting in while I open up the other one. All right, so there's our cheese. So let's get this all mixed in. So that's pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and add in my chicken meat that we had from earlier when we drained it. Both cans. Once again, you could always cut down on the chicken if you wanted to cut down on the cost of the dish, or you could actually just leave it out and it's really good just with the tomatoes and the mac and cheese. We'll just have a little bit less protein, and you might have to use a little bit of extra water in the cooking liquid since we did use the chicken juices in our cooking liquid. And now that I think about it, the other thing you could do is replace the chicken with a can of drained and rinsed beans, to make a vegetarian dish with a little bit more protein. You can break up some of these chunks of chicken if they're really big. I want to have some pretty big chunks and not just teeny little shreds. That's why I waited till the end to add that chicken. I'm going to put the lid on this and just let it set for 5 or 10 minutes just to kind of absorb any leftover liquid and let it all kind of, the flavors meld together. And then I'm going to serve it, and it's going to be great. All right, now this has set for about 10 minutes, and this is ready to go. Look at that. Oh, that smells so good. All right, let's serve this up. Wow, this is going to be amazing. That is delicious. I have never had this with the chicken before, and it's really, really good. This is another winner from Dollar Tree. The next dish I came up with, I'm calling chicken verde enchilada bake. It's inspired by some of my favorite flavors, so it shouldn't come as any surprise that this ended up being my favorite meal in a bag that I've ever come up with so far. And I've built up quite a collection. You can check them out in my emergency meal kit playlist if you're interested in seeing some more. For this meal, I'm going to be using this small can of salsa verde. This is a 7-ounce can that they sell at Dollar Tree. I'm using 2 cans of the Dollar Tree chicken. The Dollar Tree chicken is pretty small cans, so typically I try to include 2 cans in most meals, but if you wanted to keep the cost down, you could cut this down to 1 can. And if you're not limiting yourself to Dollar Tree, you could include a larger can of chicken. I'm going to be using a can of cream of chicken soup, and then 2 of these pouches of cilantro lime rice. These are the pre-cooked rice. It's already cooked and ready to go. You just need to heat it up, so it's going to be perfect because we're not going to need any additional water. You could use a different flavor of rice if you wanted. You could use a plain rice or like a chicken flavored rice or something like that. But I think that this cilantro lime version adds a really, really nice flavor that goes perfectly and complements this dish. It's really delicious. And then the final ingredient I have here is this bag of corn chips. Now this is something I'm putting in sort of as an optional ingredient that you can use as a crispy topping over the top of the casserole. Or you could just serve it alongside for people to eat as a side dish, or to maybe scoop up the casserole with, or even just to sprinkle over the top if they want to eat it that way, even if you didn't bake it with the chips on top. But sometimes I feel like a casserole just kind of needs a crispy topping, so I like to include something. One thing to keep in mind is that this would be the ingredient that would probably have the shortest shelf life out of all of these ingredients. So you'd want to either rotate this meal a little bit more frequently, or at least this ingredient. So I would say every 6 months or so, if you haven't used this bag, you would want to go through and either take the bag off the shelf, prepare the meal, and restock your bag, or just swap out the corn chips just to make sure that they don't get rancid. All right, now let's go ahead and get these ingredients in the bag. If you include the chips, this meal is probably going to need a bigger bag. This is the bigger of the two sizes of bags that I use. If you don't include the chips, you would be able to fit it into the smaller bag. I'm going to start with my 2 cans of chicken. Next, my can of salsa verde, my can of cream of chicken, my 2 packets of cilantro lime rice, and my bag of corn chips. And now this bag is ready to go on the shelf. All right, so for my chicken verde enchilada bake, I am going to mix everything up right in the pan so that we don't have any extra dirty dishes at all. This is going to work just great. And I'm going to start with my cream of chicken soup. All right, I'm going to empty this into the pan here. We do not need to grease our pan before we get started. This will be just fine. And now I'm going to add in my salsa verde. Now you can see this is mild, so this is not going to be a spicy dish. It's just going to have a really, really lovely flavor. I'm going to go ahead and pour this in, and I'm going to mix these together. I don't know if I'm going to end up using a whisk. I think I can do it just fine with my skinny scraper. And then I won't need to dirty up another utensil either. All right, that's looking pretty good. So now I'm going to add my 2 cans of chicken, and I'm going to add the broth and everything that's in them. Everything in the can right in here. Just going to give this a little bit of a mix. We don't need it to be, I don't want to shred the chicken up too much because I'd like some nicer, bigger sized chunks still. I'll just get all this mixed in. Now this is another one where you could cut back the chicken if you wanted to make it a less expensive dish. And actually, if you just left out the chicken, I haven't tried it this way, but it would still be, I think it would still be delicious without the chicken, and it would make a lovely side dish. In fact, now that I mention it, you probably could throw in a can of drained beans for like a vegetarian main dish instead of the chicken. I would use a light colored bean, like a white bean. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix in my 2 packages of rice. You can sometimes give these a little bit of a knead before you open them, just to separate the rice kernels. They're not kernels, whatever they are, the rice pieces, but these actually feel pretty loose already. All right, so now I'm just going to mix this all together, get the sauce mixed all into the rice. It's going to look a little bit soupy at first probably, but as this bakes and cooks together, the rice will continue to absorb the liquid, even though it is already cooked rice. And it really makes just a delicious, wonderful dish. Now, just like so many of my meals in a bag that do bake in the oven, because not everyone has emergency oven use, something that they can use when the power's out to bake. You could also do this in a pot on the stove. You could just dump all the ingredients in and heat it and just serve it that way. There's usually a good amount of flexibility in a lot of these dishes. So depending on what the situation is and the tools you have available to you, you can adapt and overcome. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven at 350. Like I mentioned, everything in here is already pre-cooked. There's nothing that really needs to cook to any certain temperature to be edible. We just want it to be pleasant to eat. So we just want it to be warmed through. In fact, this is a dish that we tested out our solar oven with, and it was not as sunny that day as we thought that it might be. So it took a while, but we actually were able to get it hot enough to eat. It was actually just about 165 when I finally took it out. And sometimes with a solar oven, you have to go a little bit low and slow, kind of like a slow cooker. So I was just impatient. I took it out. We ate it. It was delicious. And that's just one different way that you can bake without power. But I'm going to go ahead and put this in the oven. I am not going to put the chips on until a little bit later in the baking time when it's almost ready. We'll put them on just to crunch them up a little bit at the end. 350 if I forgot to mention that. All right, I have baked this for about 20 minutes. It is bubbly and hot. I did stir it one time. I like to do that just in case there was any clumps of the soup or anything like that that needs to get mixed in. And it also helps it just heat more evenly. So this could be ready to eat just like this, and it's delicious. But I am going to go ahead and add some of the corn chips onto the top and then put it back in for about 5 more minutes. I am crushing them up just a little bit. And I won't need all of these, so if you find a smaller bag, then that would work very well. Or you can just have some left over for snacking. I actually did use a lot of those, though. It's not a really big bag that you get at Dollar Tree. All right, back in the oven for 5 minutes. All right, so now the chips are all crisped and toasty on the top, and the casserole is bubbling, and this is ready to serve. All right, let's take a scoop of this casserole and give it a try. Oh my God, this smells so good. I love these kind of flavors. All right, let's see how it is. I love this dish. I love the flavors of the rice. The corn chips add a whole different sort of dimension to it. I think it's equally good with or without the chips, but it is kind of nice to have that little bit of a toasty crunch. This is so good. I gotta say, I think this is my favorite meal in a bag that I have ever made so far. Honestly, including the ones that weren't Dollar Tree meals. This is delicious. If you like these kind of flavors, you're gonna love this dish. The final bag I'm doing today is just 2 ingredients. It's not a meal in itself, but something that can be served alongside any meal or used as part of a meal. I'm making a 2-ingredient bread. I've never seen yeast at Dollar Tree. That doesn't mean they don't sell it, but I've never found it at any of my stores. So this is what they call a batter bread or quick bread. More specifically, this is a beer bread or based on beer bread. Have you ever tried beer bread before? It's delicious. Of course, Dollar Tree doesn't sell beer either, so I had to get a little creative once again. So the only ingredients we're going to need for this bread is going to be a box of pancake mix from Dollar Tree. This is a Hungry Jack Original Complete Pancake Mix, and it's a 16-ounce box. So it's got about exactly 3 cups of mix in this box. And then instead of beer, we're going to be using a can of lemon lime soda. So this is just a 12-ounce can of soda from Dollar Tree. That's all we need to make the bread. And then this is the bread pan that they sell at Dollar Tree for $1.25. I believe it's an 8-inch loaf pan, and it's the perfect size loaf pan for this loaf of bread. So if you want, you can grab one of these and throw it in the bag as well. Now let's go ahead and get our bag put together. This very simple recipe will fit into the smallest size bag that I have. And we're just going to go ahead and add in the pancake mix, and then the soda, and then the bread pan. And this bag is ready to go on the shelf. Fixing up this bread is going to be so simple. I've got a mixing bowl here and just a scraper spatula. I'm going to start by emptying the pancake mix right into the bowl. And then we've just got to pour the soda in. It will foam up, so make sure that your bowl is plenty big. Now, soda is shelf stable for a while. It won't last forever on the shelf. I have had sodas in cans that have gone, I don't want to say bad. They changed the taste. So I'm not sure how long they would last for making the bread, because I think there's different. I usually have diet soda, and I think that sometimes regular soda can last longer. But this is probably a recipe you would want to use your bag within a year or so, and not try to keep it on your shelf a whole lot longer than that. But if you have experience with keeping soda and how long you've been able to keep soda on the shelf, then let me know down in the comments. In case I didn't say this before, now this is what is called a batter bread. or a quick bread rather than a yeasted bread. We are just going to get this well blended. Make sure we get all the dry bits. Don't over mix it too much. So now this is ready to go in our pan. And we actually don't really need any nonstick spray in this pan. This is a nonstick pan, and you can use any pan you want. A lot of people like to avoid a nonstick coating on some of their cookware. But if you have nonstick spray or any kind of butter or anything to grease your pan with, then go ahead, but it will be fine without it. Just going to dump this batter right into the pan. Now the sugar in the soda is actually going to be perfect for this because a lot of beer bread recipes that use pancake mix call for a little extra sugar to be added. So with the soda in place of the beer, we don't even need to do that. Beer bread is usually a slightly sweet bread. So think about kind of that slight sweetness of like a Hawaiian roll or something. That's really a nice little sweetness in your bread. I love how clean this bowl scrapes. It's almost like nothing even sticks to the bowl. That's pretty cool. I'm just going to try to get this spread down so that we don't have any air pockets at the bottom, and give it a nice smooth top as well. You can also tap it a little bit just to make sure the dough is all the way down there. Now I'm going to put this in the oven. I've got my oven preheated to 325. That's a nice low temp, so it's great for if you're using one of your emergency type of baking ovens, because sometimes it's hard to get a higher temperature on some of those. So this is going to go in at 325, and it does bake for close to an hour. I think I did mine for about 55 minutes last time, and it does need the longer time. I thought mine was done because it felt done and it kind of tested done. And then I kind of poked in further to see, and it was still gooey in the center. And because of all the poking and lifting that I did, I actually made a big hollow spot in the center. So trust me, it does need close to that full amount of time. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in at 325, and we'll see you back when it's done. All right, here is our bread fresh out of the oven. It's all golden brown. This looks beautiful. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this on a rack to cool for probably about 10 minutes, and then I will remove it from the pan. I might have to slide a little cake releasing tool around the edges here or to get it out of the pan. And then I'm going to let it cool the rest of the way on the rack before I slice it. All right, so this has been cooling for just a little bit. So let's see if we can release this from the pan. Still pretty hot. There, now we will let this cool the rest of the way before we slice in and see how it looks inside. All right, so the bread was cool, so I decided to cut into it. Forgot to turn the camera on at first, but it is difficult to get those first slices without crumbling it. This is such nice, tender bread. It is so good. You can see it gets a little bit dark from the bottom there. I don't know if you can see that. And I think that's from the pan, like the extra heat from the pan heating up. And it doesn't taste any different. But you could probably avoid that by using a different pan, like maybe a glass pan. But you barely even notice it, and it doesn't taste any different. Just a little teeny bit of an ombre color. All right, I've got to try this bread with some butter. This is really good. I am shocked that this came from 2 ingredients. Of course, the pancake mix is kind of a cheater ingredient because it's going to contain other things in there, like probably baking powder and salt and sugar and things like that. But it's just a time saver and a step saver, and it means we can put 2 things in a bag and make a loaf of bread. This will go great with any kind of soup or really any meal. And you could also throw peanut butter on this, spread some peanut butter on it and have it for breakfast with some honey maybe. You could toast it. You could make sandwiches out of it even. It's a good sturdy but tender bread. This is really a good little trick to have in your pantry. I hope this new collection of meal in a bag recipes will be helpful and that you and your family enjoy these recipes as much as we did. Having these bags on the shelf can be a real lifesaver. And I'm continually amazed at the kinds of meals that can be made with only Dollar Tree ingredients. These meals are some of my favorites ever. Keep in mind, Dollar Tree is not necessarily always the cheapest place to buy things. So if you do have access to other stores, you might be able to make these meals even cheaper. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a dollar bill emoji down in the comments and check out this playlist next for even more meals in a bag ideas. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.